Hello. Isn't it strange how when your mind starts to wander, you make all sorts of previously unimaginable connections? This particular train of thought started at Gloucester Cathedral and led me to all sorts of other places. So I was musing on the cathedral, a wonderful example of Gothic architecture, and this led me to this man, John Stafford Smith. He was baptised in Gloucester Cathedral in 1750. He was the son of the organist Martin Smith. He attended the cathedral school and he became a boy singer. He furthered his career as a choir boy at Chapel Royal, London, and studied under William Boyce, the composer. By the 1770s, he had gained a reputation as a composer and an organist, and was elected a member of the Select Anacreontic Society. This was a popular gentlemen's club of amateur musicians. They named their club after the Greek court poet Anacreon, who lived in the 6th century BCE, and whose poems, Anacreontics, were used to entertain patrons. He was dubbed the convivial bard of Greece, and his songs often celebrated women, wine, and entertaining. The membership of the club included Samuel Johnson, James Boswell, and Sir Joshua Reynolds. The satirical cartoonist Gilray had this take on the society. However, they did take the music seriously, and they held regular concerts. Joseph Haydn himself was one of their guests during one of his visits to London in 1791. Smith composed music for the Society's constitutional song, entitled To Anacreon in Heaven, the Anacreontic Song. The words were by Ralph Tomlinson, the president of the Society, and they were inspired by the 6th century Greek poems. The song became popular in Britain and also in America, following the establishment of several Anacreontic societies over there. It was a popular drinking song on both sides of the Atlantic. The story now moves to Baltimore during the war between Britain and America that began in 1812. The British Navy was laying siege to Fort McHenry in Baltimore, seen here today. An American civilian, Dr. William Beans, was arrested by the British and imprisoned on one of the British ships. A young lawyer called Francis Scott Key was sent on board to negotiate his release. He was successful. However, the British feared that he would divulge their plans for attacking Baltimore, so they detained him aboard a truce ship for the duration of the battle. Key thus became an eyewitness to the bombardment of Fort McHenry, and as dawn broke the next morning, he could see the Stars and Stripes flag still flying from the fort, meaning that the attack had been unsuccessful and that America had held out. He was so moved by the sight that he composed a poem on the spot, and he called it The Defence of Fort Henry. It was published within a week, and it was suggested that it was put to the tune of the popular song To Anacreon in Heaven. The song with his lyrics became known as the Star Spangled Banner, and slowly gained in popularity as an unofficial anthem, finally achieving official status more than a century later under President Herbert Hoover as the national anthem. The national motto, In God We Trust, derives from a line in the Star Spangled Banner. In June 1813, Major George Armistead arrived in Maryland to take command of Fort McHenry. He commissioned Mary Pickersgill, a Baltimore flag maker, to sew flags for the fort. The larger of these two flags would become known as the Star Spangled Banner. The tale now takes an unexpected turn, and we meet a new player, this man, Daniel Edgar Sickles, American politician, soldier, and diplomat. Born into a wealthy family, he was involved in a number of scandals, and we will shortly come to the most celebrated of these. His indulgent parents had packed him off to the Manhattan household of Lorenzo da Ponte. He was Mozart's old librettist, and the hopes were that young Dan would get an education there. Here we can have a little diversion on the colourful life of Lorenzo da Ponte. His birth name was Emanuele Corneliano. He was born in 1749 in Cineda, which was near Venice, and the family was Jewish. His father, then a widower, converted himself and his family to Roman Catholicism in order to marry a Catholic woman. Emanuele, as was the custom, took the name Lorenzo da Ponte from the Bishop of Cineda, who had baptized him. This young Jewish man became a Catholic priest, and in 1773 moved to Venice, where he made a living as a teacher of Latin, Italian and French. Although he was a Catholic priest, he led rather a dissolute life. Whilst he was a priest at the Church of San Luca in Venice, he had a mistress with whom he had 2 children. He was tried and charged with public concubinage and the abduction of a respectable woman. It was alleged that he had been living in a brothel and organising entertainments there. He was found guilty and banished for 15 years from Venice. He then moved to Vienna, where he met Mozart and wrote the libretti for the composer's 3 most popular Italian operas. They are Don Giovanni, The Nozze da Figaro, and Così fan tutte. He eventually moved to New York and he opened a bookstore. He gained an unpaid appointment as a professor of Italian literature at Columbia College. He was the first Roman Catholic priest to be appointed to the faculty. He was also the first to have been raised as a Jew. In 1825, he produced the first full performance of Don Giovanni in the United States. He also introduced Rossini's music to America. Da Ponte was living with his adopted, or maybe natural, daughter, Maria Baggioli. Dan settled into the family life a little too well. Before long, he was rumoured to have seduced the adopted daughter and blackmailed her husband. And a few years later, he would seduce Maria's 15-year-old daughter, Teresa, seen here. He brought her before the formidable Roman Catholic Archbishop of New York, John J. Hughes, to be married, only when she was visibly pregnant. However, Sickles was a serial womanizer. On a trip to London, he sailed not with his wife Teresa and their baby daughter, but with a prostitute called Fanny White, whom he even introduced to the Queen Victoria. Eventually, his compulsive womanizing drove Teresa into the arms of a lover. The lover was Philip Barton Key, a handsome young widower who was Washington's district attorney, and he was the son of the author of the Star Spangled Banner. When Sickles found out about his wife's affair, his reaction was lurid. He howled, he groaned, he wept, and he raged about his ruin and dishonour. And in a somewhat hypocritical fit of jealousy, Sickles shot Key in broad daylight in front of many witnesses in an area close to the White House in Washington. Ever the chancer, Sickles acted the outraged and deceived husband and put in a plea of temporary insanity caused by his wife's infidelity. It was the first time that this plea was used in an American court, and it worked. He got off. On the outbreak of the Civil War in America in 1861, Sickles reinvented himself as one of the war's most prominent political generals, recruiting New York regiments. Despite his lack of military experience, he served as a brigade, division and corps commander in some of the early Eastern campaigns. His military career ended at the Battle of Gettysburg in July 1863. This was the bloodiest battle of the war, is often described as the war's turning point. The two armies suffered between 46,000 and 51,000 casualties. On the second day of the battle, Sickles moved his third corps without orders to an untenable position. It was virtually destroyed. He was wounded by cannon fire and he had to have his leg amputated. The severed leg, meanwhile, was donated by Sickles to a military museum, and he used to take his friends along to visit it. His absence from the rest of his body failed to curb his romantic adventures. He was dispatched to Spain as America's representative there and began an affair with the deposed Queen Isabella II. He lived on until 1914. There is one final sideline on the Key family, and that is the second cousin of Francis Scott Key, better known as F. Scott Fitzgerald. When you know this family history, you can see where the F. Scott came from. But that's another story for another day. That's enough for today, and I hope you'll come back and see where I go next time. Goodbye for now.